I think if I can compare anyone to Daniel Jones, I think people are getting tricked by Daniel Jones the way they're getting tricked by or they got tricked by Baker Mayfield. Which if you
That's rude, but it's true.
Also, who was more talented coming out the draft?
Alrighty, welcome everybody back to another video here on the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and I'm currently doing a series here on this channel where I'm talking about all 32 NFL teams in depth leading into the 2023 regular season. And because I'm a Chicago Bears fan and not a fan of the 31 other teams, I can't give that personal in-depth insight that fans of those teams can. So I have been joined by fans for each of these videos, and if it's not apparent from the hat of the gentleman to my right, we're going to be talking about the New York Football Giants today. And of course, the gentleman to my right is a returning guest from last year's team preview series, my buddy Djax, excuse me. I am stuttering over myself. This is a great way to start. But before we jump into this, how are you doing today, man?
Living life. I feel wonderful. Glad to be back.
Yeah. It's a good thing we got you back over some of the other characters that we may have had on the Giants episode last year. No disrespect. It's just, I know a certain somebody that we were talking about before we started recording would have had some choice words for a certain quarterback in New York. And I don't know if I could handle his excitement after what happened.
We're not talking about 5 points.
We are not talking about 5 points. No. He just didn't respond to my DM this year, unfortunately. But hey, you know what? It is what it is. We keep moving. But speaking of that quarterback, that's kind of where I want to start this, is just where do you stand with Daniel Jones after last season and obviously after him getting his extension?
I think he's fine. I think he's one of the quarterbacks in the NFL.
That is true.
He's like 20-ish. I think I rank him like 18 to 22, maybe. He had 3 really good games, and 2 of them were against the Vikings defense, and the other one was against the Colts. So three Pee-wee football teams, really.
Essentially, yeah.
I mean, besides that, he frustrated me a lot last year, especially in the beginning of the year. The Titans game, he was pretty bad. But he did, develop down the stretch, aka he threw it to the open crossers down in the mid-range of the field. He really didn't extend the ball at all, even when there were people open. Darius Slayton was open down the field a lot, as an example. But I don't think he's not capable of doing it. He just didn't trust himself to do it. Maybe that's the Jason Garrett in him, which is a whole nother rant I can do. But I think he's fine. I think he has the upside to be okay, but he's not super consistent week to week. I was talking to someone, and they're like, would you rather have Mac Jones or Daniel Jones? And I think I trust Mac Jones to be more consistent week to week, but I do think Daniel Jones has a higher upside.
Sure.
So I think he's worse than Goff or Cousins. Or Tua, people in that range, but I think he's in that Mac Jonesy range, whatever that is, like Tannehill, Mac Jones.
Okay, I can get behind that. Out of curiosity, there's 2 quarterbacks that you and I are big fans of that might be in a similar tier there. Where do you have him ranked versus Fields and Jordan Love?
Well, Jordan Love is 2.
Of course, right.
And Fields is a tough one because I see the talent and I'm oh, there's some plays I'm he is so freaking good. And then he just doesn't rip the ball when we should throw the ball sometimes. And he got better over the past year, but I think Daniel Jones was a better passer overall than last year. Who I would rather have on my team is Justin Fields, because I think he's more of a dynamic runner and he gives you a higher upside. And neither of them are really super consistent as of yet.
Sure.
But I still think they're in the same, not interchangeable in a sense. I think I would rather have Justin Fields if I want to win games. But I think Daniel Jones loses you less games than Fields did the way he played last year.
Yep. I mean, I feel like the two of them were kind of in similar situations last year. It's just Daniels was elevated by the coaching staff that he had, right? Because you look at these two, and they're two quarterbacks that rely heavily on their athleticism. They both have the ability to, hit guys downfield and make plays downfield, but for different reasons, it seemed like they didn't trust something, right? Like Fields, his wide receivers were essentially plucked off a practice squad. And I know Daniel Jones's were the same way. It's just he had Brian Dable scheming those guys open. So where Fields guys couldn't get any separation, at least Jones's were open. And it almost seemed like he didn't trust himself to take those shots downfield, which is fine. You know, if you have a good team around you, which the Giants are building around him, you can get away with being a more conservative quarterback. And I feel like that's almost what the Giants wanted him to be last year, is just like, hey, don't fuck up. That's
Right.
kind of what they were asking of him last year. And we'll get into some of the numbers that kind of show that. But I wanted to ask, because I feel like that's something I've seen a lot of conversation around. And I agree with you. I think Daniel Jones right this second is probably a little more developed as a passer. But I do think now that Fields has weapons around him, we're going to see him kind of take that next step and be something different. But Daniel Jones also has better weapons around him. So maybe he also takes that step, and we'll have to see. But more specifically with him, obviously you talked about him as a player. How do you feel about the contract he was given by the Giants this offseason?
I was upset in the moment, but I'm like, it's fine. Like, really, we can get out of it in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what a quarterback goes for at this point. What Jimmy G went for 3 years, $72 million, and he is like better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
True.
And he's younger than Jimmy Garoppolo. So he should be making more money than Jimmy Garoppolo per a year basis. So this year, and it's fine because we got Darren Waller. We kind of built some pieces around him. We were able to keep Saquon. Next year might be a little bit tough because that's really when the cap hits. And that will really be the prove it year for Daniel Jones, even though quarterbacks, when was the last time a quarterback got like 6 years to prove it? I don't know.
Right.
But it's end up going to be fine. What I think is going to happen, well, my fear of what's going to happen is that like he just continues to play fine, and then he gets a more like a longer extension, and it's just like we have like a mid quarterback situation, like a Tannehill or a Goff in the Rams, and we just can't elevate because Daniel Jones is like mid. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, and I agree. I remember when it happened, I was like, Giants paid Daniel Jones. But you step away from like the initial shock of it almost. You're like, okay, relative to what everyone else is making, like you said, this isn't terrible money wise. And he got a year under Dable. He looked better. Why not give him another two? Right? See what happens. Because, like you said, the way the contract's set up, it's only really a 2-year deal with an out in the third year. So if he shows more improvement next year, you're going to feel a little bit better about it. If he doesn't, it's like, okay, maybe you try to draft a quarterback or something and then let Daniel Jones be a bridge quarterback for that second year that's remaining in the contract and then go from there. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Like, you couldn't not pay him. You couldn't
Yeah.
go into the draft without Daniel Jones on your roster because the Giants, where did they pick? They picked in the 20s, right?
Yeah, 24.
Yeah, I mean, Will Levis fell, and I know you're a big Will Levis guy, but that, it would have been too risky to go in without Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for paying him. I don't think it was the worst decision in the world, even though I'm not super high on Daniel Jones myself. It makes sense. It's what they had to do. And speaking of things the Giants had to do, kind of moving off of Daniel Jones and into the guy that's the real superstar of the offense, Saquon Barkley. Obviously, there is a lot of drama surrounding NFL running backs right now, and Saquon was at the forefront of that as, I would say, the most talented running back that needed to get paid. And he did end up getting paid, and the Giants kind of met him in the middle with this contract that I thought was a good deal for the team. But what are your thoughts on that whole situation in hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably best case scenario for the Giants because we got him for a year and then we can tag him next year, and at the end of the contract he'll be 28. And then we reevaluate. I was on the boat of just paying Saquon Barkley because he was really the reason why our offense was like pretty competent last year. Him
For
and
sure.
Daniel, or him and Brian Dable, obviously. But like
Mhm.
when you have 8 people in the box, it's going to make it easier to throw the ball. When all the eyes, the safeties, the linebackers are really focused on the most talented player on the field, it's going to make it easier to do that other thing. So I was like, there's no, like, we can't, him not being on the team this year or next year is just going to set us up for failure. So really, I think in that 2-year mark, both with Saquon and Daniel Jones, we might see like a retooling um, thing going on. And I have no idea how Saquon's going to do in 2 years. He could be the exact same. He probably will be worse. How much worse? I don't know. So
Right.
it's a good deal for the Giants, and I'm glad Saquon pretty much guaranteed has 2 more years of getting money. So
Yeah. No, and you explained it perfectly. It was the perfect situation for the Giants. And while Saquon probably could have gotten more money if, injuries weren't an issue, because I feel like if you're walking into this offseason with a Saquon Barkley that didn't have all these injury problems, you pay him whatever he wants, right? Because he's in that same tier as the guys like Christian McCaffrey, or, when he gets there eventually, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, who are not just running backs, they're also dynamic weapons in the receiving game. Like, I know, I want to say it was Bobby Okereke tried to say that Saquon was a better pass catcher than Christian
yeah,
McCaffrey, which is like, no, but he's probably second, if not third. Him and Eckler are kind of the next two guys up. So I'm glad that the Giants are keeping him around. I'm glad that they figured something out, because, like you said, he is such an integral part of their offense. Like, without him, the play action game that you relied so heavily on last year does not work. I can remember in the Bears game, right? Because obviously I watched that whole thing and suffered through it. A big reason why the Giants were able to win was not only because Saquon took over in the fourth quarter when Daniel Jones went down, but early on in the game, play action was killing Chicago. I mean, if you watch their linebackers on any given play, their eyes are just glued to Saquon. They weren't even phased by the idea of Daniel Jones hitting them over the middle. And he ended up exploiting that. And even more so, the read option game, because obviously Daniel Jones and Saquon can move, but early on in the season last year, teams were more worried about Saquon. And that ended up killing Chicago too. We saw Daniel Jones have that like 15, 20-yard rushing touchdown. Like, that was such a big thing for the Giants last year. And Saquon, I know running backs aren't valuable or whatever people want to say. He was the Giants offense last year.
yeah,
He really was. Even if he wasn't directly getting the ball, his impact in the way he affected games and the way teams paid attention to him, like you said, was why the Giants were able to be so successful. It was that and Brian Daboll's offensive genius. That is why this team started out, 7-0? Was it their 8th game that they lost, or was it the 9th game?
I think I don't think we went 7-0. I think it might have been 6. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Either
It was
way,
something.
they were the last undefeated team in football, whatever
Yeah,
it was, right? There's a reason why this team started out so hot. And I'm just glad Saquon got paid. I'm all for running backs getting paid. And even with the injury stuff, I'm with you. I would have just paid him outright to begin with,
yeah,
but it ended up working out both ways. So can't complain there. But
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say play
You're good.
action. I think, not to bring everything back to Daniel Jones, but that play action really feels like really important to our offense last season. I'm assuming it's gonna be just as important this season. I think if I can
Mhm.
compare anyone to Daniel Jones, I think people are getting tricked by Daniel Jones the way they're getting tricked by or they got tricked by Baker Mayfield. Um which if you
That's rude,
who's
but it's true.
also who was more talented coming out the draft, or who really performed better? Baker Mayfield for the most part.
Mhm.
But like it's the same, like play action boot, everyone's focused on Chubb, and then
Mhm.
Baker could overthrow Odell by 15 yards or hit anyone else apparently. And it's kind of the same thing as like play action, boot off of it, run, throw it to Slayton who's open in a cross, or throw it to Hodgins who's open in a cross. So it's not really Daniel Jones making any super high level throws. He's just
No.
throwing it to the first read who's open because everyone's focused on Saquon. So we'll see. Do I think Daniel Jones is gonna career is gonna end up like Baker's? Probably it'll be better, but
Yeah.
I just think that's an interesting comparison. I just thought about it right now.
No, you're absolutely right. It is essentially the same thing. But yeah, I think it's very accurate. Honestly, I don't know why I hadn't thought of that sooner because it is spot on. And I don't think he will end up like Baker either because I think at the very least Daniel Jones is more accurate than Baker. And I think that goes a long way with that type of quarterback because you're just asking him to hit an open guy, right? And some guys can, some guys can't. Obviously, as a Bears fan, I watched Mitch Trubisky for years. They tried to do the same thing with him, and he just couldn't hit an open guy. So, at the very least, to give Daniel Jones his flowers a little bit, he has that leg up on some of the other quirked up white boys that have been in the same situation as him. But looking at the Giants last season, this is a team that went 9-7-1 after that super hot start, finished third in the NFC East. They were 5-3-1 at home, 4-4 on the road, and then kind of drifted off at the end there with a 2-3 record in their last 5 games. But they did win a playoff game. They went into Minnesota and beat the Minnesota Vikings on the road, which thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. Um,
My
and
pleasure.
yeah, as you were a part of the team on the field assisting
I beat
in
the
that
Minnesota Vikings.
you did. Um, but just kind of looking at that because I kind of skipped over it. What were your thoughts about that game? Like going into it and then coming out of it?
I knew once we lost to the Vikings, week 16, I think, off the Joseph's like 60-yard field goal. I was like, this is the only team in the playoffs that we can beat. Um, I really wanted to play them. I obviously didn't want to play San Francisco. And there's no way for us to play the Bucks. So I was really just like, this is like, I want to see this team again because we not like exposed them in the regular season. They still won, but like I saw Daniel Jones hitting wide open throws and that stupid quarter half defense they played. Um, that defense was just it was just so bad. I just think they were built poorly. They were built poorly in general, but they're really built poorly to play against the Giants pros. So going into that game, I was super confident. I really thought we were going to win. And what I thought was going to happen for the most part, did happen. Justin Jefferson was a little bit more quiet than I thought he was going to be. But besides that, like Kirk Cousins in the playoff game, do I really trust him? He played fine. That infamous fourth down throws it 2 yards to TJ Hawkinson is classic Kirk Cousins. Um, but that defense was bad. We exposed it in the playoffs. And we outcoached them, even though we were less talented than them. But that obviously only takes you that so far when you have a team that's almost as well coached with exponentially more talent than you. You lose 38-7 or wherever we lost to the Eagles. So that was a rough one.
Yeah, I mean I thought the Vikings were going to win that game. I'm not going to lie because partially I had a Vikings fan chirping in my ear the week leading in, feeding me the propaganda. And I was like, okay, I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. I'm with it. And then you get into the game and you're like, oh, okay, I forgot this Vikings defense was generationally horrible. And Daniel Jones I'm not going to say picked it apart, but Brian Dable picked it apart. And Daniel Jones executed the way he needed to. And the Kirk Cousins play at the very end was very Kirk Cousins. So it was a game that I took a lot of pride in watching. And I know that's just me being a salty Bears fan. I don't care. It was still fun. I enjoyed it. But jumping off of that and looking at some of the numbers, specifically EPA per play and their points, points scored, points allowed, all that good stuff. This is a team that was third in rushing EPA per play. No surprises there. Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones on QB options and whatnot go Burr. Fantastic. 13th in passing EPA per play. As we said, Brian Dable is just scheming up a very effective and efficient passing game. 31st in run defense EPA per play. And I'm going to ask you about that here in a moment when I finish talking about these, because that is really bad. 19th in coverage EPA per play. And then in points scored, they were 16th across the board. They were 16th in points scored with 365, 16th in points allowed with 371, and then 16th in point differential with a -6. So, like I said, 31st in run defense EPA per play, the second worst run defense in football, despite having the man that is Dexter Lawrence clogging up the middle, absolutely going nuclear against the Minnesota Vikings, cementing himself as one of the best defensive tackles in football last year. So, in your opinion, from watching the team last year, what do you think was the main reasoning for that run defense being so bad?
I want to say, well, really everyone else besides Dexter Lawrence.
Fair.
Really, I mean, I think he played like 68% of snaps, something like that, which is a huge number for D tackles, but we really had no depth behind him. Leonard Williams was out a lot of the year. Kayvon Thibodeau was probably our best edge rusher or best run defending edge rusher. And he was out in and out of games. Our linebacking core was horrendous. We started like Jalen Smith part of the year.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm trying to. Beavers was on our team. Did he play that much? I honestly can't remember the linebackers
I
on our
don't.
team. Micah
I don't remember
McFadden.
how much he played. Yeah.
That's a guy like um
The
linebackers
Mr.
were bad.
Irrelevant from however long ago.
Tay
I always forget his
Crowder.
name. Tay Crowder. Yeah. Yeah, that face tells you all you need to know about Tay Crowder, which, by the way, fuck Tay Crowder. I know you saw my TikTok a while back where I was yelling at him for hitting Kari Blasingame after a play. He's a bitch, and he's bad at his job. But anyways, continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, you're good. Tay Crowder's not on the team anymore, so I don't count. I'm
Yeah.
not rooting for him.
Right.
But yeah, our linebackers are bad, mixed with bad depth really everywhere, but especially in the interior defensive line. It just mixed with like just a bad rushing game or bad rushing defense all around. Dex can only do so much when he's on the field, really. You can just triple team him and run around him, and he'll fill the gaps, but no one's going to make the tackles because you have that meme of, the meme of Jalen Smith. I think he was at the Cowboys at the time where he was trying to jump and he's like 10 yards away. And I was like, that's our Mike right there. That's my guy. So I'm glad we got Bobby Okereke, I think Okereke Okereke. I feel like there's always different pronunciations for his name, but he will fill that role pretty well. He's a lot better than anyone else we have. We have got more depth with Ashawn Robinson, plus Leonard Williams will be back. Hopefully healthy. Kayvon Thibodeau will hopefully be more healthy. I expect our team run defense to be like average, which is I think all we kind of need. Yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, you add Deontay Banks, who was probably the best run defending corner in the class.
Yeah.
You add Bobby McCain from the Commanders, who's a pretty all right run defender. The dude from the Buccaneers, Nunez-Roches, he's a solid enough run defender, can rotate in and out. Like I thought the Giants did a pretty good job this offseason at attacking, run defense specifically because it was so bad and they really needed to. And I thought Bobby Okereke was the perfect move for that because not only is he a really good run defender, but with his athleticism and his range, he makes an impact in the passing game as well. So he was the perfect fit for what the Giants needed. He's the first like legit linebacker the Giants have had in quite a while, in my opinion. Like I'm a big Okereke guy. I really thought he was going to be a Chicago Bear. I'm not complaining with how it turned out, but because of his Indy connection with Matty Eberflus, I thought he'd come in. So I was doing a lot of research on him during the season and during the offseason. I kind of fell in love with him. Like he is awesome. And I'm glad the Giants have a guy like that. And then Darian Beavers isn't a bad run defender. It's just when you rely on him as much as the Giants kind of had to with everything going on, that's not great.
Yeah. And he was a rookie last year. So it's like relying on a 6th-round rookie. Always iffy.
But he can only get better, right? He can't get any worse than he was last year. So I like what the Giants did to attack their run defense this offseason because it really, really was bad. But talking about the defense, jumping over to the defense and looking at the coverages, obviously this is a defense coached by the man, the myth, the legend, Wink Martindale, who is one of the most aggressive defensive minds in football. He is very much like a high risk, high reward type of guy, going to set a ton of pressure. So looking at their coverage splits last year, they were first in running cover zero with 9.3% of their defensive snaps being out of cover zero. They were sixth in cover one with 25.2% of snaps. They were 31st in cover two with 2.2% of snaps. They were 24th in cover three with 28.8% of snaps. They were tied for seventh in quarters with 19.1% of snaps. They were 12th in quarter half with 8.2% of snaps. And they were fifth in cover two man, cover five, whatever you want to call it, with 2.2% of snaps. So very much a Wink Martindale year in terms of coverages, especially being top of the league in cover zero, which they ran a lot in the red zone. No surprises there. And then you look at the blitz percentages, and it's even more Wink Martindale. They blitzed 80% of the time on third and short between the 20-yard lines. Like, the red zone's a different beast there, but in the primary, like, main chunk of the field, they blitzed on third and short 80% of the time. Very obviously, that's first in the NFL. That's crazy. On third and medium, they were fifth in the league with 53.3% of their snaps being blitzes. And they were third and long with 49.4% of snaps. Good Lord, I cannot talk. So just classic Wink Martindale year. Gonna see more of that next year. Not really a lot to say there. It's just, if you know Wink, you know. Like, he's super aggressive, and that's just how it is. I'm excited to see how he's going to use some of the new guys like Deonte Banks this year because of how physical and aggressive he is in man coverage. I'm curious if we're going to see him going at the quarterback a little bit this year, because I think that could be really fun. I think Bobby Okereke is going to have a ton of fun in this defense. Obviously, you're going to get year two of Kayvon Thibodeau in this defense, who was like him and Wink Martindale were a match made in heaven. So it's going to be a fun year for the Giants defense after a lot of disappointment last year. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that or not, because I just kind of rambled.
No, yeah. I mean, I like Wink because he runs a defense the way I would run a defense in the NFL. That's a real man. Cover zero is real man's defense.
Mm-hmm.
Or cover, just man press, just out muscling people corners. I am really excited for the Giants defense, the new additions this year. I think Banks, I mean, he's raw. He's super athletic. Probably will get a lot of holding calls.
Probably, yeah.
Which is fine because he's a rookie, as long as they're not super duper costly. And even so, like, they're just learning curves. It's rather doing it week 1 through 4 than week like 15 through 17 through 18.
Right.
So I mean, I like the way we play defense. It really, I don't know. It's like, you'll beat us if you're talented enough, or like if you know enough. Like, we're not going to lose to freaking Baker, mate. Sorry, Baker. Throwing you under the bus again. We're not going to lose like Baker Mayfield or like someone who stinks. But we'll lose to guys like just quick processors. I'm trying to think of the games we lost last year. Like Dak, lost to the Cowboys. Dak's a quick processor.
Jaguars was the first loss, right?
We lost to the Cowboys earlier in the year, but I want to talk about that game.
Okay.
That game was stupid. We lost to Cooper Rush.
That's right. I forgot about the Cooper Rush game. I'm sorry.
No, it's laughable. It's laughable.
Oh my God. I mean, I have no room to talk, obviously, but like that's so funny. God love Cooper Rush, man.
Guy stinks. I'm sorry. I'm burning bridges for you on your podcast. You're never gonna have Cooper Rush or Baker Mayfield on here ever again.
Hey, you're saying it, not me. I'm innocent here.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I think we ended up beating the Jags last year, but we lost the Seahawks. I mean, there's just teams with teams that have good quarterbacks and get the ball out quickly, or can read the defense, and they'll struggle less than teams that like we should beat. So I feel confident going into next year because we should beat the teams that we should beat. It's not like a situation like, I don't know. Historically, I feel like it's not the Steelers play up to their competition, but also they play down to their competition.
That's the exact team I was thinking of too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Steeler way.
the Steeler way. But I don't. I at least defensively, I feel confident that we should blow out teams that have bad offenses.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's the thing. Wake Martindale's just going to feast on bad quarterbacks and feast on young quarterbacks and quarterbacks that have slow processors. And that's just kind of where he makes his money. That's where the Giants are always going to dominate. And it's a fun defense. Like you said, it has its ups and its downs, but the perfect way to describe it is high risk, high reward. Like
Yeah,
you're going to send everything at the other quarterback, and sure, like I don't want to compare it exactly to the 85 Bears, but it's the same kind of mindset where it's just fuck you. We're just going to send everything at you. And if you're Dan Marino and you can pick it apart, you're going to pick it apart. And there's quarterbacks in the league that are like that right now. But I love the aggression. I have nothing but respect for an aggressive defensive coordinator, which is so ironic because Vic Fangio is my favorite defensive mind in football. But that's neither here nor there. Jumping over to the offensive side of things, though, we kind of talked at length about Daniel Jones, so I just want to throw out some of the numbers to give that context. Nothing really to say much about these. It just goes along with what we've already said. This is a team that was sixth in play action percentage with 31.3% of snaps. They were fourth in average time to throw with 3.03 seconds, meaning they were the fourth slowest team to get the ball out. They were 24th in air yard percentage with 49.1% of their yards coming through the air rather than after the catch. They were 31st in average depth of target with 6.9 yards. They were 32nd in big time throw percentage with 1.2%. I want to say Buffalo had the highest percentage and they were at like 7 something. So that's pretty low relative to, the range
yeah,
from top to bottom is pretty big there. And they were 30th in yards per attempt with 6.6. So what we've already said, it was just, hey, Daniel, you're going to get a guy that's going to be wide open off play action. Just hit him. That's all I'm asking you to do is just hit him when he's wide open. And he did that. So props to him for it. Those numbers don't look super impressive, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it
right.
works, it works. It wasn't like it was the offense that cost them their season and, kind of sent them on that losing streak towards the end and then got them beat in the playoffs. It was the other side of the ball. We already talked about how they attacked that. And then the running game, it's going to be good no matter what. It's just fun to look at the splits here. This is a team that, kind of strays away from the norm. You see a lot of teams right now specialize in outside zone and the Shanahanian offense, so to speak. This is a team that was 30th in outside zone with only 10% of their rushing attempts being out of outside zone, but they were tied for 6th in inside zone with 31%. Makes a ton of sense. You have Saquon, run it up the middle. He's going to get yards consistently. They were tied for 21st in duo with 14%, tied for 14th in power with 9%, tied for 22nd in counter with 4%, tied for 6th in draw with 5%, which makes sense. The majority of draw plays in today's NFL are QB draws. When you have Daniel Jones, you're going to run QB draw. And they were tied for first in pin and pull plays with 15% of their rushing snaps. So like I said, kind of different from the rest of the league. And I like it. It's fun. It's different. It works. Brian Dable knows what he's doing when it comes to drawing up the running game.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish he'd use a goddamn fullback. That's all I'm asking. He had one in Buffalo that was absolutely fantastic, and Reggie Gilliam kind of teased us a little bit last year with Chris Myrick playing some fullback who I believe he's still on the roster. I don't think he's gotten cut. So maybe
I don't know.
maybe he plays there again. I've seen a couple people that are Giants fans that I've talked to that went to Giants camp saying that Daniel Bellinger was taking some fullback snaps, which yes, please. I love Daniel Bellinger. Calling him a fullback would make my year. But I don't know. That's my only complaint with their run game. Please use a fullback. I am begging you. It would make Saquon better somehow, some way.
Well, I don't know how much he's going to use a fullback, especially
I
now
know
with the
he's not
addition.
going to use one. I know he's not.
You know,
I'm
first
trying to
and goal.
manifest it. Okay. Let me live in my delusions. I know he's not going to use a fullback.
Well, what I will say, if Bellinger really is lining up in H back or fullback, whatever he's doing, I think it's going to be kind of like DeGuara
Mm-hmm.
and the Packers, how they kind of used him. I'm not going to say juice at all, but
No, I get you.
how much
Yeah.
how much do I trust Bellinger blocking a whole lot is iffy. But overall, I mean, I think that they'll lose him similar to DeGuara versus how the Vikings use CJ Ham.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But I mean, I could see that happening every now and then, getting Bellinger on the field. I mean, used a 4th-round pick on him last year. He showed a little bit of promise at tight end. Now we have Waller, who will play. It's not like Waller's only going to play tight end. He'll play in the slot. He'll
Yeah.
play
No,
whatever. But
Bellinger's still going to see the field, but I do think if
yeah,
anything, it's going to be more like he's an inline tight end and Waller's lined up out wide, or they're running 12 personnel and
yeah,
he stays in the block or run a short route and Waller kind of goes deep. Like I don't think we're going to see much fullback or H-back play from the Giants this year, unfortunately.
you never
Breaks
know.
my heart, but I mean, yeah, crazier things have happened. I'm going to hold out hope, but I don't think it's likely.
One day the Giants will have a fullback again.
One day. I mean, they almost had one last year. They signed one as a UDFA. Oh, God, I can't remember the kid's name for the life of me. Oh, this is going to bother me. He wore number 27. He was there for all of preseason. I hyped him up on the preview last year, and then he got cut before the season started.
Was it like Johnson? No, I'm thinking of someone else.
Hold on. I got to look this up. Hold on. This is going to bother me.
While you look it up, I'll talk about how I think I do think he's the best running game coordinator in the NFL, which is a hot take considering
I was going to say that's definitely a hot take.
Arthur Smith exists.
Arthur Smith, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, all of those guys do exist.
Yeah, that weak zone, outside zone. That's not.
That's real football. That is real football.
Real football.
Get with the times, buddy.
Real football is pulling your center, like Abel will do this year.
We will see that. That is true.
I mean, he was doing it last year with freaking Feliciano or whoever that freaking was playing at center, and he was garbage. But now we have someone who's actually athletic. Brett Coleman compared John Michael Schmitz to Creed Humphrey, which got me a little bit too excited.
I see it. By the way, Jeremiah Hall. That was his name.
Jeremiah Hall. That's what it is. I was thinking of Josiah Johnson.
Josiah Johnson. Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
But he was not on the Giants. He was on the Patriots, I think, right?
Maybe.
I don't know. Anyway, I don't care about fullbacks enough. Not as much as you do, unfortunately.
This guy over here disagreeing with my fundamental core beliefs.
It is what it is. Anyway, real football is not little outside zone, whatever. It's pulling your guards, pulling your centers, pulling your tackles. Anyone that can pull can and will pull. Throwing a receiver crack. But no, I do think Dable did magical things in that.
No, for sure he did.
Year.
He did.
And I just think it's just going to be so much better this year with John Michael Schmitz. With hopefully we get anyone else on their offensive look. There's guards. Zudu hopefully will be developed. He was their round pick last year. Hopefully will develop into being okay. Hopefully Evan Neal can take that step up. He is super unreal athleticism. So in the run game, I expect them to be a lot better. In the passing game, we'll see. But pulling Evan Neal with a receiver crack or Hodgins cracking and Saquon on like a little stretch play gets me going.
I mean, understandably so, yeah.
So we'll see. I think the run game will be very good. If Saquon stays healthy, I expect I don't want to say career year because his rookie year was unbelievable. But I expect like a phenomenal year on the ground.
Vintage Saquon. That's what we're getting.
I hate when people say vintage. Like, more towards basketball because someone will be like, "Oh, vintage." I don't know who's someone who's mid. Vintage
Chris
Patrick
Paul
Williams.
Vintage Patrick Williams, who's been in the league for 3 years?
All right, I don't know what I was supposed to say. Or I don't know. Someone who's like that was an awful example.
Vintage Pat Bev. There you go.
Pat Bev. I'm like, he's still just as good as he always is.
Right.
But no, I think we get a good Saquon. I think 1,500 plus yards is my expectation.
That wouldn't shock me.
And even with, I think Eric Gray is going to get some touches.
Mhm.
Breida will get a couple touches a game. Hopefully, nothing more than that. But I like Eric Gray. I think we're going to try and use Saquon a little bit yet less, just because we will probably have him for 2 more years. But I still think he's going to have a massive year despite of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as much as I love wide zone rushing schemes, that is what I will push. I do love what Brian Dable is doing. It's different. It's fun. It does have a little bit of old school football to it. And the idea of John Michael Schmidt's pulling does excite me. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But someone you mentioned that I actually wanted to highlight when we were doing this is Evan Neal, because if I'm not mistaken, that's the pick that you guys got from the Bears in the Justin Fields trade was Evan Neal. It wasn't Kayvon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this is like a victory lap or anything. I like Evan Neal. I think he's going to be really good for you guys. I just think last year was a learning year because obviously he's switching from left to right tackle. And that shift isn't as easy as a lot of people make it out to be, right?
Yeah.
Shifting from one side of the line to the other. Not everyone is ambidextrous as an offensive lineman, right? And it was very apparent that seemed to be at least the issue for Evan Neal last year, because a lot of what was going on, his feet were kind of a mess. His hand placement was all over the place. He wasn't getting out of his stance the right way. Like it very much just seemed like he couldn't mirror the dominance he had on the left side to the right side.
Yeah.
And obviously he's going to be stuck there. Andrew Thomas isn't moving anytime soon. Arguably the best tackle in football right now. Had to throw that out there.
Absolutely.
But Evan Neal on the other side, I'm really hoping that he develops this year because I'm rooting for him. I'm not some weirdo Bears fan that's like, I want to be able to say we won the trade, so fuck Evan Neal. He needs to suck. I hate that. I hate that. I could go on a whole rant about like evaluating trades with draft picks after the draft picks have been used because I think that's a poor way to evaluate them. That's not what's being traded. Like the Bears didn't trade Justin Fields for Evan Neal. They traded a future first round pick and pick 20 for pick 10 or pick 11 or whatever it was, right? That wasn't the trade. Or more specifically, it wasn't Kadarius Toney and Evan Neal for Justin Fields. It was the picks. But I really do think he's going to have a big year. I think this is going to be, I think he's going to adjust better. I think having, another year in this offense, another offseason work with Brian Dable, another year to work with Andrew Thomas, who I'm sure is helping him out constantly, giving him a ton of pointers. He's a high character, high athleticism guy. Like you mentioned, him pulling across the line is super fun to watch. And if he can put it together this year, I know you were talking about the guard play, which is kind of iffy. If he can pull it together, I'm going to feel a lot better about this offensive line for the Giants this year. And I really hope he does. In fact, I know you saw me tweet about it. I'm putting together like my all agenda team. And I can confidently say Evan Neal is going to have a place on that. I am rooting hard for this guy. I want him to be something good. I want him to be paving the way for Saquon. So I'm really high on Evan Neal. I think he's going to be good this year.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely take a step up. I mean, how many tackles were good their rookie year? Charles Cross was last year good, but he's such a different play style than Evan Neal. And we also knew he was going to be good off the jump. Who else? Like Becton was good his rookie year, and now he has a bunch of stuff going on. Tristan Wirfs was really good his rookie year, but now he's not the best tackle in that class at all.
Braxton Jones was good last year.
Braxton Jones was good last year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
All right. I'm being nice to your tackle. You be nice to mine, goddamn.
No, I do like Braxton Jones. But I mean, it's just a hard position, and it takes time for people to learn it. And there's not like my point is there's not many tackles who the rookie or young tackles that were good right off the gate.
Right. Yeah.
It's take a year difficult. Or 2 years to learn.
Especially making that transition. It makes it a lot harder.
Absolutely.
And especially when you consider all the stuff that Dable's asking from his tackles. Like you mentioned, the amount of pulling and movement that is required for that position. Like he's a great athlete, and he's somebody that he showed last year in the run game. If he gets his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. It's just he was a little inconsistent with the whole getting his hands on you part. Yeah. So if he can just put it together, that's the thing. He had his flashes. He showed last year that there are ways he can win and ways he can dominate. You just have to pull it together. And I think
Yeah.
another offseason with Dable, learning from Andrew Thomas, and really having more weight on his shoulders, because last year he was probably, like, okay, this team can do something. I need to get my shit together so we can do that. Because if I suck, then I'm going to hold everybody else back, right? That's something that I feel like, is kind of an underrated aspect of players' development, is when they're on a good team. People don't talk about like the pressure that they get put on them, and then they kind of have to take that step up because they don't want to let the other people around them down. And I think, I don't know Evan Neal. I don't know what's going on in his head, but I would assume that's probably something he's feeling or something he's at least thought of. So I'm excited for him. All that to say, I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year.
Yeah, I think our offensive line will be significantly better than last year. I remember I actually said this last year on this podcast, but I'm going to say it again, that all you need is an average offensive line. And all you need to do to have at least an average offensive line is just have 3 good offensive linemen. And if you have 3, you can scheme around the 2 that are bad. But if you have 3 that are bad, you can't scheme around that. And I think we'll have at least 3 competent ones. If not more. I think, like I said, we're talking about John Michael Schmitz. I think he'll be at least competent, if not very good or pretty good. Andrew Thomas is the best left tackle in the league outside of Trent Williams.
Okay, I was gonna say you better throw that little asterisk there. We are not going to erase Trent Williams from our memories.
Don't worry, Trent Williams was on my all agenda team, so
well, he's Trent Williams. He's the king,
and he's so good. I had a take like when Cooper Kupp won Offensive Player of the Year. I was like, that should have went to Trent Williams.
They'll never give it to a lineman, sadly.
Never.
Like Creed Humphrey should have won Offensive Rookie of the Year his rookie year, and I can't remember who won it that year. I forget what his rookie year was at this point.
That was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, so it would have been Mac.
Did Mac Jones win Rookie of the Year? That's hilarious.
I'm like 95% sure he won Rookie of the Year because he was like the only competent quarterback from that class that year.
Yeah, because it wasn't Trevor Lawrence, and it obviously, and Trey Lance didn't play, Fields didn't play half the year. Zach Wilson is Zach Wilson, so yeah, I guess it would be Mac Jones.
Were they the same draft class?
Who?
Oh no, Jamar ended up winning it that year.
Oh,
I remember that was the debate though. It was the whole year. It was like, do you give it to Jamar Chase because he's the better player, or do you give it to Mac Jones because he's the good quarterback? That's okay. But either way, I remember people were arguing Creed should have won it that year, and I can't say I disagree. But unfortunately, they'll never give an award like that to a lineman. That they stay sleeping on the big boys. I mean, hey, give me John Michael Schmitz Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm here for it.
I mean, who's the competition? That midget in Carolina, that running back in. I'm just kidding. I don't like calling quarterbacks running backs. I mean, I'm not going to push that agenda. Actually, I'm not going to do it. It's not realistic. But I think he'll have a good year. I think Evan Neal will have a good year, and Andrew Thomas is already super good. So that's 3 guys, and you can scheme around the other 2. Azudu.
Well, I don't think Mark Lewinsky's even that bad. I think he's all right. I think he's competent.
There's
I can see that. I was going to say I can see we are not in agreement on that.
Yeah, that guy.
I mean, hell, you probably know better than I do, but I thought he was at least serviceable.
He was a guy. I mean, he was better than Shane Lemieux. So he's all right. I mean, there's worse. There's worse offensive linemen out there. He's not like Robert Hunt. So sorry, Robert Hunt. Also, another guy who's never going to come on here now.
God damn it! I'm never gonna have anyone on here if you keep this up.
No, you'll just have the good players.
Yeah. Please say something negative about Jordan Love. I don't want him to come on.
Never. That's my king.
This guy likes Jordan Love more than he likes his own football team.
Well, I push Jordan Love. Here's the thing. I don't push Giants agendas.
I know you don't. You push agendas for literally everyone else.
Yeah.
Your existence is one big agenda.
Isn't everyone's low key? Like, what do you do? What are you
I
living
mean,
for if you're not pushing
fair, but
your narratives?
you're just very self-aware and open and extreme about it. We'll put it that way.
Of course. What other way is there to live? What, are you gonna be passive about the things you like? Like
I mean,
my whole
fair.
thing, my whole thing about Jordan Love, the lore. There's not lore. No one
The
knows me.
lore.
I
Oh my
I had
god.
Jordan Love as QB1 in that 2020 class because I looked at this was really before I really watched film.
Mhm.
The first year I watched film was that next year. But I was like, I looked at Jordan Love. I was like, he played really well in the year 2018 when he had a lot of people there. I was like, Joe Burrow, his ceiling's not super high. I was like, he got carried by the greatest receiving core ever and the greatest team. No, I didn't want to say he didn't get carried. That's being dramatic. But I was like, I don't know how high of a ceiling he has. Brett Pullman convinced me that Justin Herbert was awful.
My
And Tua, we don't have to get into my thoughts on Tua. I thought he was pretty good. So, but either way, I was like, I have Jordan Love at QB1. And until proven wrong, I'm going to push narratives that still have that hope of him being the best quarterback in the draft class, which would mean he's like a top 3 quarterback in the league.
You're gonna have to remind me because it's been so long. Was Daniel Jones 2019 or 2020 for his draft?
2019. So the reason
2019. Okay. Okay. Because
yeah,
I was gonna
it
say
should have been
I
Herbert.
was gotcha. Okay. Um, but anyways, moving off of that and talking about the Giants because nobody here cares about Jordan Love except for you because you're weird and you're wrong and you like a quarterback that is not good.
I like
Let's
many
talk about
quarterbacks who aren't good.
let's talk about some more players that aren't good by going into free agency and talking about some of the guys that left the New York Giants. And normally I would ask, like, which of these players do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the team not being there anymore? Let's be real. There was like maybe one guy that'll be impactful, and we'll talk about him. Let's ask this a little bit differently. Who are you the most glad is gone? Like, who are you like dancing in your home thinking about him not wearing a Giants uniform next year?
I'm not going to say the obvious answer
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted Kenny Galladay actually when we signed him. And I can't be wrong. So it has to be the world that's wrong. So I can't say that. So I'll say who I'm most happy to be gone is probably dang, I can't really I need a list of people
Yeah,
in
here
my
I got you. So
yeah.
Kenny Galladay, Fabian
Mhm.
Moreau, Jalen Smith, John Feliciano, Richie James, Justin Ellis, Tony Jefferson, Landon Collins, Marcus Johnson, Nicholas Williams, Nick Gates, Julian Love, Henry Mondo, and then obviously Tay Crowder.
It's Tay Crowder. I forgot about Tay Crowder. I think it's
It's
Tay
got
Crowder.
to
It's
be
Tay
Tay
Crowder or
Crowder.
Jalen Smith.
Mm-hmm.
They both equally caused me pain, but Tay Crowder's been on the team longer, so I think I
Mm-hmm.
have to blame him. Um, Also Feliciano, I'm glad he's gone. Sorry, Feliciano. I'm sad Nick Gates is gone, not because he's like super good, just because just the things like his injury and like I just
Mm-hmm.
was like really rooting for the guy. I'm still rooting for the guy, obviously.
Yeah.
But I would say Tay Crowder, and the linebackers in general.
Yeah.
Um,
See, I mean, I just named off everybody that left. I feel like Julian Love is somebody that a lot of people are looking to and are like, that's gonna sting. I don't think it's going to sting as bad as a lot of people think because of a move they made at safety, and we'll talk about him when we get into the guys that got added. Richie James, kind of the same thing. Like, he's competent, he's a solid receiver, but with all the weapons the Giants added, it's kind of null. There's not going to be
yeah.
anything really felt from that. Kenny Galladay, I have my notes written down with like notes under every player. If I wanted to go into them, we're not going to. But under Kenny Galladay, I just have in all caps, underlined, full bold, 6 exclamation points, freedom. Because that the Giants are free. He can no longer hurt the fan base. There's no more memes about him making more money than touchdown receptions or whatever. Like, it's over. You are free from the Kenny Galladay narratives, the Kenny Galladay slander. all of that is gone. It's over. And I feel like a lot of people probably wanted Kenny Galladay. Good God, I can't talk. Kenny Galladay when he was coming out of Detroit, because I can remember as a Bears fan, I was like, "Oh, Kenny Galladay would be cool in Chicago." Like he was good in Detroit, and then something
Yeah.
happened when he went to New York, and he just wasn't anymore. And it is what it is. It's over with. He can't hurt you anymore.
I think it
So
was a mixture of a couple things. He came over in 2019, I think it was, and I think at that point we had Garrett as our head coach or as our
mhm,
offensive coordinator, which really took all the aggressiveness out of Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones was
mhm,
already not a guy who was going to throw a lot of contested catches or contested catch opportunities, and that's what Kenny Galladay was best for.
sure.
So I think that like schematically didn't work. It wasn't a good fit with Daniel Jones versus like Stafford. Stafford would just chuck it up there really sometimes. So,
Mhm,
um, and at the like this, he just also just got worse.
mhm.
But I think at least in the beginning part of the contract, it's more schematically Garrett, Daniel Jones. It just wasn't a good fit um, for his skill set.
For sure. And that happens sometimes. I was gonna say I feel bad for the guy, but like he still got his bag. So
Yeah.
props to him. At least he might have sucked. He might have had his name dragged through the mud, but goddamn it, at least he got paid.
And he scored the last
Um,
game of the season. So
that he did. He did do that. I completely forgot about that. Yeah. Um, but jumping from there over to the free agents that they kept around, we already talked about Saquon and Daniel Jones getting their extensions. Dexter Lawrence, we already talked about him, one of the best D tackles in football. He got paid. Darius Slayton, he got extended. O'Shane Zimenez, Jihad Ward, both got extended as well. Good depth edge rushers stepped up last year for who was it that got hurt? It was Azeez Ojulari that missed a
yeah,
lot of
they're
the
both
season,
hurt at
right?
times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, and some of the other names here, you've got Sterling Shepard, Matt Breida, Casey Creeder. I believe I said that right. The long snapper. Shout out to him. Jamie Gillian, the Scottish Hammer, the Polish Hammer, whatever
Mhm.
hammer. I can't.
I
Is he
think he's
Scottish or
Scottish.
Polish? Polish Hammer, I think, is somebody. I don't know, but the Scottish Hammer.
That
That was
sounds
right because
like
he had the
yeah.
Madden card. That's where I
Mhm.
was pulling that from. Um, Jared Davis, Lawrence Cager, Wyatt Davis, Jack Anderson, Isaiah Hodgins. I know I just kind of ran through the names there. I don't know if you want to talk about anybody there that got retained, but I feel like the big three we already kind of covered.
Absolutely. And I will say, I think Slayton gets too much hate in the Giants community. I think last year he was our best receiver. I think this year him and Hodgins will be our top two guys. And he was a good deep threat who I mean, he did drop some balls. That was like he's not obviously not the best receiver in the world, but he's still a solid guy. And I think having him on the field is not like a negative for the Giants. So I'm glad that we
Sure.
brought him back. Shepard is going to be like a mentoring role, so I'm not like sure how much he's going to play. Um, but I'm glad we brought Hodgins back because he was really good late
Mm-hmm.
addition. He can play that X that we don't have, and he's like the only receiver that's like not the same freaking person as
Mm-hmm.
the rest of our team. Everyone besides him and Slayton, I'm like put them in the slot, and that's really it. So um, I'm glad that we brought those two back. Zimenez is fine. I was really hoping that we would add Justin Houston or just like a third rotating pass rusher
Mm-hmm.
because Zimenez is just he's a guy out there. I'm kind of tired of seeing Ward snaps at pass rushing. He's fine on first down. I don't want to see him on third down.
Right.
So I was hoping we got Justin Houston. He ended up going to I think the Panthers.
Yeah.
So but overall, we resigned the people that we needed to resign. But it's like they're not. Besides Dex, who we extended, and the guys we talked about, Andrew Thomas, like everyone else, they're not world beaters. They're just guys that will fill out depth or
Mm-hmm.
will play our starting receiver spots.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I looked it up. The Polish Hammer was Marcin Gortat, the center from the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just look a different sport.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew there was a Polish Hammer somewhere. But yeah, I mean, everyone you guys brought back was a worthwhile retention. You paid your big names, and then some of the other names there are obviously going to be contributors. But jumping into the third-party edition, starting out with the free agent signings, then we'll talk about the draft. Out of the free agent signings, and obviously the trade is kind of lumped in with this, who are you the most excited to see in a Giants uniform next year?
I want to give an answer that's not like Darren Waller
Right.
or Bobby Okereke. I'll say from the free agents, I'm really excited to see what Dable does with Paris Campbell.
Okay.
I think he is going to be very interesting in the run game specifically. I think he can not be like Debo Samuel, because Debo Samuel is part of that stupid offense, but like a real man's pin pull off rushing game offense. I just think jet sweeps. I just think there's a lot of creativity that can be done with Paris Campbell that really wasn't used that much in the Colts or at the Colts. I think he's not going to play a whole lot of snaps, but I think he can be Curtis Samuel-esque.
Sure.
So I'm excited to see what Dable has written up for Paris Campbell.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're going to go with the trend of picking kind of under the radar names here, I'm really excited to see what A'Shawn Robinson's going to look like for you guys next year.
Absolutely.
Because like we already said, the run defense was atrocious. And obviously Bobby Okereke's probably going to be a bigger part of that, because obviously you need a linebacker that can just come in and clean up. But A'Shawn Robinson's a pretty solid run defender in his own right. When you're going to take Dexter Lawrence off the field, you need somebody to step in and be able to hold their own. And I think A'Shawn Robinson can absolutely do that. Some of the other names here, Amani Arawarie, who I completely forgot signed with the Giants. I think he's kind of been flushed out everyone's memories because we're all hyped up on Deonte Banks. Darren Waller, as you mentioned, he kind of goes without saying, one of the more talented tight ends in the league, super athletic. Going to be really exciting to see what he does with Dable. Probably going to see a lot of wide receiver snaps out of him. Raheem Nunez-Roches coming over from the Buccaneers, more solid interior defensive line depth. Bobby McCain from the Commanders. I'm excited about him. I think he's going to be a good Julian Love replacement. I think they're essentially the same in terms of talent level. Like I've seen some people say he's a little bit worse, and I can't say I agree with that. He made some nice plays for the Commanders last year on defense. Jamison Crowder coming over, good slot receiver. Same thing with Cole Beasley, another good slot receiver. Kind of sad that he got a job, but that's off the field garbage, whatever. He's a Brian Dable guy. It makes sense.
He's going to get cut, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was going to say he's not going to make the final 53. Yeah. Tommy Sweeney, who I don't know much about. I'm not going to lie to you, but he is a tight end. He does play that position. Jeff Smith coming over, and then center JC Hassenauer, I think is how you say that name. That sounds right. Either way, wasn't a huge free agent pool, but I feel like they definitely got some guys that are going to be impactful, and I'm excited to see what they do. But more importantly, more exciting, at least for me, because of all the draft coverage I did during the offseason, let's talk about this Giants draft class, because I have very mixed feelings about it. So before we jump into it as a whole, who was your favorite draft pick?
John Michael Schmitz.
Okay.
Sure.
That is the correct answer.
Mm-hmm. He was my best interior. Saying in the thought of I was counting Skoronski as a tackle, he was my best interior offensive, or my highest graded interior offensive lineman in the draft. I saw him at what he did at the not the pro day, the Senior Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He just destroyed everyone, and I was like, I need this guy on my team. I would have picked him at pick 25, and I'm super happy that we got him in the second round. So he was for sure my favorite pick.
Yeah, I mean, I had him rated as the second highest because I did have Skoronski as a guard. Mm-hmm. So obviously they were 1A and 1B though. Like they were so close. I had both of them as top 15 players on my big board.
Yeah.
They're both incredible. I think John Michael Schmitz is going to be great, but if I had to look at a different player, I guess I'd say Deonte Banks. Like you mentioned earlier, he's a little raw and he's going to have his mishaps at the beginning of the year, but I think he is the perfect type of corner for this defense. I think it's really important that he ran a bunch of different types of coverages at Maryland. Like he they had him running everything in the book, essentially. They did a little bit of everything over there, and that's a great experience jumping into the NFL. Even though Wink doesn't get too exotic with his coverages, it's mostly like, hey, you're going to look at that guy, you're going to take him out of the game for me, and you're going to try to attack the ball, which he's not very good at. He needs to learn how to get his head around.
Yeah.
We'll see how that develops. But I'm a sucker for a corner that's not afraid to get down and dirty in the run game, and Deonte Banks is the epitome of that. In fact, the more I watch him defend the run, I know this is going to sound crazy, the more I wish I could go back and move him up my draft board just because I love the way he plays the run. But yeah, I mean, him and John Michael Schmitz were both home run picks. But the rest of the class, I do have my issues. Like Jalen Hyatt, I know a lot of people liked him a lot. I don't know what your thoughts were on him specifically, but I wasn't a fan.
I wasn't a fan either. I feel good about. I had him as like a third round talent, so him being in the third round,
fourth, fifth round guy.
It was fine value for me. Like people were talking about him in the first, I would have like started playing in traffic.
Right? Yeah, that would have been horrific.
Would have been horrific. But where we got him, I think he's a specialty guy. Really,
for sure.
Put him in the slot. Let him get free releases. He can be a deep threat. But do I trust him outside? I just don't think. Like I don't. His release sucks. And I really don't like anyone from that Tennessee offense, whether that's him, Hooker, Donner Wright. I'm sorry, that all offense was fake.
It was a fake offense.
So I just I don't know how that would translate. So I didn't really want to touch any of those guys at any early. But Hyatt, it makes me feel better that he ran really fast in training camp because I saw his speed and I was like, he's fast, but he's not like I didn't see like 4.2 speed fast like people were talking about his 40s or whatever. So I was kind of afraid it was going to be like a Jalen Reagor situation where he's like, oh, he's really fast, but he's not in-game feeds fast. He's just like without pads fast. But we'll see. He'll play a limited role this year. I don't expect much out of him. It's not like I'm drafting him in fantasy, but he'll be a guy that one or two games he'll have like 80 yards and a touchdown off of 3 catches.
He'll be a go ball merchant. That's what it'll be. He'll be a go ball merchant on free releases out of the slot, like you said, because that's the big thing. Like I don't want to say I don't like slot receivers because that's not true, but these guys that like are just getting manufactured releases in college where they don't have to deal with any sort of press and they're not dealing with any sort of physicality. Like he had 18 snaps and only a single reception against press coverage his final year at Tennessee, which is horrific. And I don't think they threw him like a single 50-50 ball, which like I don't blame them. I wouldn't have either. But the point is like, that tells you how bad he is at it. And I'm not saying every receiver needs to be Mike Evans going up and catching every 50-50 ball, but the fact that they just didn't do it is a little concerning to me. So people were talking about him in the first round. I thought they were insane. Because to me, it's like you said, he's a specialty guy. He's just a burner. You put him in the slot, you have him run a go route, and you throw it up to him when he's beating the entire defense. And that'll work a couple times a game here and there. And I will say I might be a little too low on him because of that. Like third round, I didn't like the value, but then again, it could have been a lot worse is kind of how I look at it. Like when I did my draft grades, I gave this a C+, I think, because it's not the worst thing in the world. And I'm sure Dable's going to make me look like a moron and have him doing some crazy shit and, cook a defense here and there. But I'm not a Jalen Hyatt guy. I was much higher on Cedric Tillman. Like I thought he was a way better receiver, way more complete receiver. It's like they were each two halves of a receiver, right? Like Cedric Tillman had all the technical stuff and all the refinement you want. He just didn't have the athleticism. And then Jalen Hyatt's the total opposite. I feel like the two of them made a complete receiver. And, you kind of build receiver cores like that. So I'm sure Hyatt will do something. I'm not going to say he's going to be a total bum and a bust and never amount to anything, but I'm also not in love with that pick.
Yeah. I think a C plus is fine. I think that's adequate value for. Yeah, they did trade up, and I forget what the trade was, but it's fine. It's like they didn't give up a whole lot. Like I said, I don't know what the trade was. They didn't give up a whole lot. He's a third round pick. I expect him to do realistic third round pick expectations.
Mhm.
Just because I know receivers just have been so good um, in these drafts. So even like a third round pick receiver, like Terry McLaurin was in the third round. Third round pick receivers last year was like I forget. But like receivers have such high expectations coming out of the draft. And he's gonna be a role player, which is where you mid round picks is where you get role players. So he'll be fine. He'll be fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Moving on from that, Eric Gray is like the definition of backup running back. Like, I
Yeah.
think he is the perfect RB2 for a team. Like, there's really not a lot to say about him. He just does a little bit of everything, and he's okay at a little bit of everything. He'll be a good RB2 behind Saquon. If you were going into the season with him in mind as the starter, I think you're concerned. But with him just kind of like keeping Saquon fresh, preventing him from getting ran into the ground, I think you're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Eric Rowe was a 6th round pick. I like it in the 6th round. I like that we don't have to rely on Breida as a backup.
Hmm.
Um, and he's a guy like a guy that will just take touches off Saquon and won't be horrific. And he'll just run straight, and that's all I need a running back to do. Sometimes it's just to run
Pretty much,
forward.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, Next pick though, Trey Hawkins out of Old Dominion, the corner. This actually brings me to another question I wanted to ask you because I think this is really interesting. I've seen a lot of people throwing his name into the ring for starting nickel going into the season because if I'm not mistaken, there's a little bit of a position battle going on there in New York,
yeah.
and I don't know what the latest on that is. But if you were Wink Martindale, who would you start in the nickel out of what the Giants have going?
I would start flat right now. So I would have
Okay.
Banks on the outside. I would have Adoree Jackson on the outside.
Hmm.
I'd rotate Hawkins in there and Amani Oriore in there. I don't know how much the side note, Amani Oriore selection doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because he's bad in man and decent in zone.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess he'll come out when we run cover 3, but
Yeah.
besides the point. He'll rotate in sometimes, and Hawkins will rotate in sometimes, and I'll have Flat in the slot with and Aaron Robinson hopefully in the slot for 4% of plays and never comes in ever again. And hopefully we send Darnay Holmes to a black hole or to like a bit an
Oh,
abyss somewhere where
we're
he
not
can
fans
never
of big
see.
play Darnay.
Nope, he stinks. He's bad. Every time I swear every time I saw a big play, I'll look and see whose responsibility it was, and it was Darnay Holmes' responsibility. So
Mm,
that being said, I would start flat. I liked him a lot coming out of LSU. He was on that team, that Joe Burrow insane team, um, and he obviously wasn't as good as Devin Singletary, but he was decent. I think he did a good job, and I like him in this. Like I don't trust him outside. Um, but I think he's a good slot player, and that's a decent secondary for me.
for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I agree. I completely unrelated to his play. I love the fact that his name is Cordell Flott and he's playing in the slot. Like Cordell Slot
Yeah,
is kind of a cold nickname. It's corny, but I'm a corny white guy. I don't care. I love it. Um, but yeah, I think the Giants have an interesting rotation of DBs back there, and it'll definitely be interesting to see what they do. I like Trey Hawkins. He's another good like run defending corner, and obviously you want your nickel to be able to defend the run a little bit. Um, he's somebody that got a lot better his final year compared to the year before. He's a really good athlete. Like he's somebody that I think Wink can cook with once he's developed a little bit. I agree. I wouldn't start him off rip. If Darnay Holmes is really that bad, because I don't remember watching much of Darnay Holmes, I'm not going to lie to you. I would say Cordell Flott's probably the best, direction to go there as well. And
yeah.
then let Trey Hawkins develop. Maybe he becomes your longtime nickel. Who knows? We'll see. Um, Next pick, Jordan Riley out of Oregon. I don't know if you have any thoughts on a 7th round nose tackle, but that's exactly what he is. He
He's a
fits the
guy that
bill.
if he makes a team, that's awesome. Congrats on money.
Hmm.
I didn't watch him. I can't. I'm not going to make up
No.
anything on my thoughts on Jordan.
The
So
only thing I have to add is I'm looking at my notes right now from the draft. And I didn't watch him before the draft either, but I watched him before I did my draft grades video, and I have like very limited notes. And one of my notes is good length / mass to be a 2-gapper, but instead of putting gapper, I put 2-fapper. So
That's really
there
funny.
you go. There you go. Dumbest thing I've said all day, but that's what I got to say about Jordan Riley.
You know what,
He's
Jordan
never gonna want to
Riley.
come on my podcast. There you go.
You know what?
He's the one I actually scared off.
He does have the length and the girth to fill 2 holes. So um,
Oh my god, that he does. Like I said, he is a nose tackle. That is what he is. He is, you know, okay at that. And like you said, if he makes the team, he will serve that role for like 10% of snaps, and I'm sure he won't be too bad at it.
he's better than me.
There you go. He is better than Djax at 2-gapping. That is a fact. And then finally, the last pick here, Gervarius Owens out of Houston. He's somebody that, if I'm not mistaken, got a little bit of hype. People were excited about. I didn't watch him until after the draft. He wasn't on my radar, but I do remember seeing some Giants fans on Twitter get excited about him. So I don't know if you have any thoughts.
My thoughts are anytime Giants fans say anything on Twitter, they're wrong. Just continuously. I've never seen a right Giants fan on Twitter. That's not me. Or one other
That's
person.
not
Everyone else
me.
has been wrong.
Who's the other person?
Condat. It's my guy.
Okay.
Everyone else is wrong all the time. Shout out to Condats, man. Shout out to Connor. But I don't have much to say about him either. That was me stalling.
I get you. Okay. Yeah, I mean he's one of those guys that had a really cool highlight reel, but he's got to work on the down to down consistency from what I can tell. Like he's explosive, he's fluid, he made some fun plays. That's always cool. You know, again, another guy, maybe Wink can develop him, let Wink cook. I'm all for it. See what happens there. But moving out of the offseason and into this upcoming season, kind of the end here, last question. It's a 2-parter. What is your prediction for the Giants record-wise? And you can either give me a straight-up record prediction or you can give me a floor and ceiling. And then who are you the most excited to watch next year?
I think it's hard because we are better than we were last year. And if last year we were a 9-win team, I think we're at least 2 wins better than that. But our schedule has a lot of 50-50 games and a lot of games that I'm not sure we're like there aren't like last year we had like the easiest schedule in the league. I think some efficiency metric we had the easiest schedule in the league. Now it's like top 10 hardest schedules in the league. So it's tough. I think I'll give you a prediction and a ceiling and a floor. I think our floor is 7 wins, 7-10.
Okay.
And that's with injuries, and that's with Daniel Jones being Daniel Jones. I think our ceiling, I think we can get up to 12 wins, which is a huge gap. But if people stay healthy, I can see us beating Dallas. My hot take is I don't think Dallas is going to be all that great this year. And I think the talent gap has closed between us and Philly. So we could probably steal one. Not saying we're going to beat out Philly in the division or anything.
Right.
But like we have the talent now that we didn't have last year to keep us in games that we lost because of talent. And we also have the talent to win games in the games that we lost that were close, but we lost because of the lack thereof talent. I think Darren Waller will be huge for us. And apparently Daniel Jones is throwing him the ball every single play in training camp, which is kind of a red flag, if I'm being honest. But
that's the game plan this year. Completely erase Saquon so you don't have to pay him as much next year.
F it. Waller's down there somewhere.
There you go.
And I think our defense will be solid to good. I have somewhat high expectations for our defense. I like the secondary. We just have a rotating both in our corner room and our receiver room. I think are kind of similar where we have a lot of rotating like average guys with like a high potential or a couple high potential guys. So more high potential is more in the corner than in the receiving room, but I like the receiving room. I think McKinney is an underrated safety. Dane Belton is someone that I expect to be better than he was last year. The linebacking core we talked about is going to be better. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to make a step up. I think he's going to be like a 8, 9, 10 sack guy this year. Hopefully, if he stays healthy. Azeez Ojulari was already that before. Well, he got like 8 sacks, I think, before he was hurt 2 years ago. And he's just a really good pass rusher. So I expect him that to continue. Dexter Lawrence is the second or third best defensive tackle in the league, besides Chris Jones and maybe Aaron Donald, depending on how he is. So all that being said, I think our defense should be pretty good, barring injuries, and we have more depth on both sides of the ball. We have a lot of receiver depth. We have a lot of guys who can play, which we didn't have last year. So I think we'll end up at 11 wins.
A very tentative 11.
At 10.5. You know what? I'm going to say 10, 6, and 1 is
there
my
you go.
prediction.
There you go. Going to tie again.
We're going to tie the Packers because Jordan Love throws for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. And it's a tie. Don't worry.
If that happens, I hope you know I will be calling the Giants the worst defense in NFL history.
Well, what happens when he throws for 700 yards week 1?
Well, then you turn off the Xbox and go to bed. Well, the PlayStation. You're a PS5 user. You turn off the PlayStation and go to bed.
We both know I never threw for 700 yards with Jordan Love.
Yeah, you just ran all over me with Aaron Jones. Goddamn 4-3 defense of Madden can't stop the goddamn run.
And then someone I'm really excited to see. I am really excited to see Trey Hawkins. I didn't get to push any propaganda here yet, so I will say that he's the next Tyreek Woolen. He won't start week 1, but he'll start by week 4, and he's going to lead the league in interceptions and in pass breakups, and he's going to be the best defensive player ever. But no, I think he has potential to be like a very good athletic corner to match with our other very athletic corner and our veteran very athletic corner, which is a very good scheme to have with Wink Martindale, or very good personnel to have with Wink Martindale.
Absolutely.
And I'll say offensively, I'm looking forward to see obviously the progression in Daniel Jones, and I'm looking forward to see how Hodgins does as like the full-time X. So I think he's pretty good. I think he's a guy that can be like consensus can be a consensus. Like,
there you go. You got it.
It can be a consensus. This is a pretty good receiver, like,
yeah.
I'm not going to name people. So 10, 6, and 1, with the offensive player of the year being Saquon, defensive player of the year being Dexter Lawrence, and the defensive rookie of the year being Trey Hawkins.
No Jalen Hyatt offensive rookie of the year?
No, that's JMS.
Okay, so you think they are going to give it to the center. So who wins MVP?
Jordan Love.
I hate you. I really do not like you. So now that we're out of La La Land, for me, record-wise, I do think like 7 to maybe 11 or 12 wins is pretty reasonable. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I'm not going to go in detail on the team. You did all that. You hit it on the head. I think they'll probably land. I'm going to be a bit more tentative just because I'm really high on the other 3 teams in the NFC East. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think the Cowboys are going to be insane. I'm a big Sam Howell guy, so I think the Commanders are going to be pretty good. Philly's Philly. Yeah, you have your little Jordan Love narrative. I got my Sam Howell. Deal with it. I do think this is going to be a team that wins like 9, maybe 10 games. I think that's where I'm going to land with it. It wouldn't shock me to see them win more because Brian, and if they do, it'll just be Brian Dable saying, you know what, Miller football, fuck you. You're wrong. I own you. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right, Brian Dable. You're good at this. um, as for the player I'm most excited to watch, I'm actually going to say somebody you mentioned. That's Xavier McKinney. I really like Xavier McKinney. I know last year he wasn't quite what Giants fans were expecting. He didn't have that big breakout that we're kind of all waiting for. But this is a guy that's only 25 years old. He's pretty solidly athletic. He has the range, the instincts, and the IQ to be a really good free safety. He can come up in the box, play the run, man up on a tight end, play strong safety. Like I think he can be a really good safety. I think this is going to be the year where we finally see him. Now that there are other pieces in that secondary to make his job easier. I think Deonte Banks is going to be great. Cordell Flott, Trey Hawkins, whoever, and then Bobby McCain also on top of Adoree Jackson and the front seven being better. I think this is going to be the year where we finally see Xavier McKinney kind of step up and be that star safety that he can absolutely be. And even if he's not, you still have like a really solid safety. No one's complaining about Xavier McKinney's play. No one's like, this guy needs to get off the field. He sucks. It's like, okay, Xavier McKinney's good. We want him to take that next step. Like I said, I think he will. But if he doesn't, you live with it, right? And then since you said offense and defense, on offense, I'll just say Daniel Bellinger because there's a slight chance that he maybe be an H-back. He could be possibly, potentially. But even if not, I like Daniel Bellinger a lot last year. I'm excited to see where his progression is going to go. And I don't want to predict injuries. I don't want to say somebody's injury prone, but like Darren Waller completing a season and not missing a single game is a very unlikely event.
Yeah.
So in the event that Daniel Bellinger does have to step up as the top tight end, I think he can do that and he can continue to build off of what he did last year. So I'm excited to see him, but Xavier McKinney is another guy that may or may not be on the agenda. I haven't decided yet, but I do really like Xavier McKinney.
Yeah, he's sweet. He's cool. Yeah, he's cool. He's good at football. I like him.
Yeah, even though Madden always gives him like 83 speed, he's good. He knows what he's cooking. He's good. But that being said, I think that about wraps us up here. Before we go, if you'd like to plug anything, by all means, go ahead. I'll make sure to put all your links in the description down below.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok, Twitter is Djax Sports. But I would really like to plug Jordan Love is only at FanDuel is plus 3,500 for MVP. Get on the train now. And some of my other narratives include
spend your money on Jordan Love. You will go broke.
$10 gets you 350. Just think about that. Some of my other
you wasted $10. You could have bought yourself a nice lunch with that $10, but instead you threw it away on Jordan Love MVP props.
I could buy a really nice dinner with the $350 that I'll get.
That you're never gonna see.
Some of my other narratives include, but aren't exclusive to Will Levis, Kyle Hamilton, David Ajabo, Isaiah Simmons. That's all I can think of right now.
I hate you. Oh. I love how everyone else is like real hesitant when I say you can plug your stuff. They're like, is the other guy going to go first? You were just like, yeah, I make content, but hey, by the way, these are all of my agendas. Nothing to do with the Giants. Also, go waste your money on Jordan Love. Like I respect it, but I also hate you for it. But like I said, all of his links, not the links to FanDuel or anything where you can bet on Jordan Love, that will not be in the description. But his links will be in the description down below, as well as my links. You can find me. I've got 2 different podcasts going. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff, at Miller Football or at Miller Football _. And yeah, that's going to do it for this episode of the Team Preview Series. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Djax, for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like down below. Helps out a ton, shows your support, shows you care. And please let us know in the comments down below what you think about the Giants this year. Please do not comment about Jordan Love. I will be very sad if you do. Talk about the Giants. That's what we're here to talk about, not the other guy. But all that being said, to everyone out there watching, and of course, Djax joining me here today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.